Hi there, YouTube. I've got a bit of a story time today. Not a super positive one on that note, but I just feel like it's important to share this story because I also have a pretty big question that it leads me to. So, at the time of filming this, late July 2024, I had an incident about almost a year ago, about 10 months as of right now, back in September 2023, where I ended up in partial hospitalization and outpatient care for almost attempting suicide and also suicidal ideation. I had almost tried to jump off of a 4-story building, and then I also tried to throw myself out into the middle of traffic, which basically just ended in a night at the hospital, and I would have been an inpatient, but there was no rooms left, and so basically I ended up in partial hospitalization for a week. And I feel like the scariest part of the whole event was possibly my fear of going to the hospital for basically for serious mental health reasons. Like, I'm cool going to the hospital for sickness, for injury, and for therapy, because my therapist is actually based out of the same hospital I went to, just in a different department. But I have never thought, I always associated going to the hospital for mental health, for serious mental health reasons, with basically going to a mental asylum and being treated like absolute shit. So naturally I was terrified of what was gonna happen to me, not really knowing how it was gonna go. So you can imagine how I felt. For background, it was the start of sophomore year, and things were not going great. I didn't really have that many friends. I loved choir, but no one really wanted to, hang out with me. I think that's because I said I had perfect pitch, and people thought that I was, stuck up. Eventually, I learned there was actually a rumor spreading around at one point that I had sex with someone without their consent. For context, I am asexual, and I don't even give high fives or shake hands without consent. So the fact that that even happened is, that doesn't really even concern me that much, because if you know me, you would know that's not true. But anyway, things had not been really going that great. I was really, really struggling in math class, and if you know me, you know I've never been good at math. Well, at least good in math class. It's never been one of my strong suits, despite the fact that on national tests, I oftentimes score higher on math than I do on reading, which surprises me because my mom is a librarian, and I am a book nerd. But anyway, things hadn't been going great, and everything just sort of built up to a breaking point. On this one night, we had free tickets to a baseball game. I'm not going to go into the specifics about local team. I don't want to dox myself like that. But anyway, it was tickets to a baseball game for our local team. And right from the get-go, I was not happy to be there because I don't understand baseball to begin with, so it's extremely boring, and at the time, my parents hadn't really opened up all of the restrictions that they used to have. For context, my parents put really, really strong restrictions on technology, which is why sometimes I will go inactive for months on end, because God knows what they're doing, but thankfully that'll be over in 2 years when I turn 18, so hopefully we'll get consistency then, if I do have consistent motivation like I'm hoping I do in college, so yay. But at the time, they had not lifted the limits like they have recently, So my phone was locked and I had nothing to do. I had brought my headphones to listen to music, and I did at one point figure out how to calm myself down because, like, obviously there's a lot of people, it's very loud, it's a baseball game, what do you expect? And so obviously I have my music on, I'm listening, and I'm actually pretty chill, despite the fact that I'm overwhelmed by the noise and the people and the smells and everything, and I don't even want to be there to begin with. And so my dad basically yells at me to take my headphones off and be present in the moment with my family, despite the fact that I'm overwhelmed and possibly overstimulated far beyond what I am used to being able to handle with my coping mechanisms. The few that I had developed since meeting with my first therapist. We eventually had to stop meeting with her, which I was really sad about because she had a cat, and she also lived really close to me, so I could just walk to her house and I could pet her cat, and he was awesome. I do miss her. There was also a macaw on the way to her house that I would sometimes see, a big blue macaw. So I do miss my old therapist, but I love my new therapist just as much. So I had only been meeting with her for about like 6 months. I had been on a waiting list for a therapist with my local hospital, and like I had been on the waiting list for that for a couple years, and they hadn't found anything. So we just decided to take matters into our own hands and just find a local therapist. So obviously she wasn't like connected to any of like the mental, like the health records or any of that done through the local hospital and insurance and all that. So I had a few coping mechanisms, but it was mostly to handle like my dermatillomania and my emetophobia. So it wasn't necessarily a lot about the overstimulation that we had really touched on. A lot of it was also about, I don't want to call it PTSD because it technically doesn't qualify as trauma, but just just things from my past that I just can't let go of, that seem to control me. For context, I'm not going to name names, but there was this one person when I was in 3rd grade who I was really close with. We were really good friends, and then like a year or two later, they just decided to turn on me and just backstab me, and I have, in a way, never recovered, but I have been mostly able to mask it in public, especially when I see this person. So thankfully that's not affecting me, at least visibly. So most of what we had touched on with my other therapist was concerning all of that, and hadn't really gotten into the overstimulation, because at the time, I was still trying to find friend groups at my high school. Now later I would learn that, because I made a new friend on a trip to Italy recently, which will be covered in another video, and the friend that I basically spent that trip with, because it was a school trip, had a confirmed autism diagnosis, and told me that I likely have it, some sort of low maintenance, high functioning, whatever it is, the one where like you don't need like a care team. It's like not the most, it's like very, very mild, kind of, but like, and at the time I didn't even know that. I had considered it, but at the same time, the only examples of people with autism that I had in my life up till then had more extreme cases and like needed more like full-time care and stuff like that, and like had issues communicating and all that. So at that time I thought that I hadn't really learned that autism was a spectrum. I was a very sheltered child and did not know anything. I didn't know shit. So obviously I figured that was out of the park. I did have my ADHD diagnosis. I think we were working on an OCD diagnosis, maybe a dermatillomania diagnosis. I knew I also had some sort of anxiety disorder because I got that from my mom. No shocker there. I am an anxious person. And so basically, we're at this Reds game, and my dad notices I'm listening to music and not interacting with the family. And so he tries to like call my name and, like, say, hey, take that off. But obviously I have my music up loud to sort of combat the loudness of the baseball game, so I don't hear him. And so he then comes over to me and, like, sort of, like, violently jerks my shoulder and says, take that off. We are at a baseball game and you are going to interact with your family. And I'm like, I'm hot. There's a lot of noise. I don't want to be here. And he's just like, come with me. We're getting ice cream. And I kind of am happy about this, but not really, because I know chocolate ice cream does always cheer me up, but it ended up not being chocolate. It was some sort of weird, like, vanilla strawberry stuff, and yet he said he wasn't, this is gonna sound very, very selfish, he said he wasn't gonna pay for extra ice cream. I understand that. It was free ice cream, likely free tickets too, so I can understand that, but at the time, that just worsened my mood, because I had been given, I don't like change, and, like, when people say I'm gonna get something, and then it's, like, either not true, or, like, basically, like, you say you're gonna get ice cream, they know that the only kind of ice cream I eat is chocolate, and it's not chocolate ice cream, so basically I can't eat it. It's like saying there's gonna be food, and the only food is pizza. I will have a whole other thing on the pizza story later. So yeah, that obviously worsens my mood. I was told I would get ice cream, and there is no ice cream that I'll eat, because I am very picky about my sweets. I only eat chocolate, no peanut butter in it. No peanut butter, no thank you. So yeah, that already puts me in a bad mood, because I was gonna, yeah. So we go back, and despite what he said, I put my music back on, and he gets even more mad. And so he takes me aside for a big talk about how this is a family event, I'm not participating, and that's unacceptable, and he's gonna, like, take my stuff away. And I'm just like, oh my god, why? It's like, I have, this bare minimum is what I need, because this is how I communicate with the few friends I still have, including my partner. Well, at the time, we weren't really together yet. It wasn't until prom in October. It wasn't until their homecoming in October that we really, like, got together, and we're still together, so yay. But, like, they were, like, my only friend at the time, and then also, obviously, there was music, and, like, I get really anxious taking tests, and so, like, my teachers, especially my science teacher, a lot of them were very accommodating and would let me listen to, like, lo-fi study music when I was doing work in class or, like, taking a test. Eventually, we got it onto the IEP that I have noise-canceling earbuds. I couldn't tell you where those are right now because my room was recently rearranged, and I don't know where anything is. But yeah, I did eventually get noise-canceling headphones, but even then, a few teachers still let me do music because music is always better than silence to my brain. So anyway, he's telling me that it's like a family event, I'm not participating, he's going off on all of this, and like threatening to take away everything, including my phone, my iPad, which, if you didn't know, at the time it wasn't this iPad, but it basically same gist. I use it for my art. It's that's all I use it for, and I don't really have the money or resources to invest in good traditional art supplies, nor do I have the place to store that equipment, because the 2 bins under my bed are junk drawers. And that is, like, all they've ever been used for. So he's starting to take, like, all this stuff away, like, ground me, and I'm just, like, I'm freaking out. And again, a lot of this story is going to sound very selfish, and that's part of the reason I struggle with self-deprecation and self-destruction. But since September, no self-harm, like suicidal ideation or any of that, because I'm sure you can understand why. But basically, he's not saying it directly, but I have very bad word interpretation, and simple things like this can cause me to think I'm a horrible person, I am a nuisance to this family, I shouldn't exist. And so basically we were by this railing, And so I started looking down it and, like, imagining my broken body on the ground after jumping. And I looked over him, and I was like... And then I looked back down, and he didn't connect the dots. It literally took him another, like, 30 minutes of yelling at me about how I'm always acting so dramatic and making a big deal out of everything, and blah, 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 for him to actually realize that, and me just looking from him to the ground below, back to him, for him to actually realize something was going through my head. And so he took me off to another side by the stairs where I couldn't jump, and was like yelling at me for having suicidal ideation instead of like actually doing something to help me, like offering to help calm me down, like asking me what's wrong, stuff and like yada yada yada. He was yelling at me for being selfish and wanting to kill myself. He was basically saying that me wanting to kill myself in that moment was selfish. And I was just like, that is not making me feel any better. Although obviously I didn't say that. Because I don't have the confidence to speak my mind in front of him. Unfortunately. That's a whole other story for another time. That is like from forever ago. It's always been that way because of things that happened when I was really, really little. So I've never really had the confidence to speak my mind in front of him, especially when he's in this like flying off the handle mode, like just yelling at me and just being absolutely insane. So basically I have sort of just shut down. I'm basically mostly unresponsive. He notices that I'm like digging my fingernails into my skin. I'm like doing like that, but like really digging in and like trying to like kind of maybe draw blood. I also had some scratches on my arm that I had made with thumbtacks from a couple days before when he was getting really, really mad at me for my grades. Because my grades were, I mean, like, we were like a month in and I was already failing Algebra 2. So, obviously, yeah, that's not fun either. And granted, this is before my whole Mario Kart obsession started, before I'd gotten my own Switch. So obviously he wasn't like threatening to take away like Switch time or anything, because honestly, at that time, I hadn't picked up a Nintendo Switch in forever. I just hadn't, except to maybe play Minecraft with my siblings. And even then, I still mostly did it on a computer, because the Switch was... It's a 7-year-old Switch. It's a basic model, 7 years old. The controllers aren't great. When you're playing on the TV, they're pretty delayed. When you're playing on the tablet, there's a chance for stick drift. It's just a whole mix of things. And I was really into the closed species servers on Discord and just doing art and all that. So he wouldn't really threaten to take away all of that, but like the threats to take away like what I do for fun, plus like yelling at me for my self-destructive thoughts, just really was a terrible mix. And so we decided we had to leave early because of my mental health. And on the way back to the car, I looked out to the oncoming traffic and almost jumped. And my dad had to hold my arm the whole way back because he didn't want me to jump in front of oncoming traffic and like get hit by a bus or something, even though that's like a very comforting thought to my brain at the time. Like, yay, let's get hit by a bus. Like, obviously, no, that's bad. So basically, I curl up in the back. I am just not doing great. My brother doesn't give two shits about me. And that's honestly still true to this day. I just stopped caring about him either. My little sister's like, what's gonna happen? Is Ace alright? Is Ace gonna be okay? And my mom's like, Ace is gonna be fine. Granted, at the time, I didn't go by Ace. At least not in real life. Because my parents have this whole thing about not going by anything except a variation of my birth name. More on that later. But yeah, on the way home, my mom's like, Ace is gonna be fine. Ace is gonna be okay. And so they get home. My dad drops off my siblings and my mom. And he asks me, are you better? And I'm just like, I still want to die. And so he takes me to our local hospital, which ever since I was very little, going to the hospital for a serious mental health reason has always just freaked me the fuck out. Like, I viewed it less as going to the hospital to get help and more being sentenced to an insane asylum. Since I was, like, really, like, kindergarten age. So he takes me there. Obviously, I'm having a panic attack because of it. Basically, we get there, and unlike the last time I had been in the emergency room, which was in about a year ago, actually, because it was, during this summer camp. It's a punk rock summer camp. It's a nationwide thing called Girls Rock. And he had taken me to the ER then because my picking was really bad and he just wanted to make sure everything was going to be okay. That time it took us like 4 hours to actually be seen by a doctor, but here we checked in. There obviously weren't any seats in the main emergency room, so we sort of sat in like on like this little donut stool out near the sliding doors, and literally like within 5 minutes, they were like, we have a room ready for you, come on back with us. And unlike the last time I had been admitted to the emergency room, even however briefly, this room was very different. Instead of like all of the medical machines and like a TV and a curtain for privacy and all that, this was a empty, sterile room. It had like a padded counter area for sleeping, more like counter areas for like doodling, with controlled markers and all of that, a very strange looking chair, and a TV in a box on the wall. You don't even have any kind of remote. If you want to change what you're watching, you have to walk up to a little panel underneath the TV, and then there's this tiny little narrow window that looks out over a nearby college. I think. My memory might be distorted because that night was terrifying. And my dad was staying in with me, so for like the first 7, after like a certain time, they got me changed into the sterile hospital outfit and all that, and then after a certain point, all the lights went out. My dad and I sort of had to share the padded counter to sleep. I did not sleep at all. Luckily, he was still allowed to have his phone, so he at least played my sleep music, which, as cringy as it sounds, it's like new age binaural music. I don't know why I started doing that in like on like some beach trip however long ago. Back when I was actually still allowed to have my iPad at night, because to them it was literally just a sketchbook, and it still is just a sketchbook. Don't know why that changed. But anyway, so luckily he's able to do that, but I am just like up all night terrified, and like at like 6 a.m, they literally bring in an extra hospital bed because I have not slept a wink, and yet at the same time I'm also super exhausted but also super terrified. So they bring in that extra hospital bed just to give me a little bit of just to allow me to sleep for a little bit, and I can sit there the next day. And so basically it's basically like a triage situation. We're sitting there waiting to see if they have any inpatient rooms available, and so it takes them like a good 16 hours to get back to us about the inpatient situation, and there's like nothing available except for like this one like third-party place, and like my dad looks into it and is like, this is not a good place for a 16-year-old to go. At the time I was 15. This is not a good place for us to send our child. They decided to wait a little longer just to see if anything else with the hospital itself opens up, and it doesn't. I just sort of spend the day in that hospital room watching HGTV and other random crap, maybe doodling. I at one point walk around the psychiatric ward, or like the psychiatric triage area. I don't know what it's called. Just that general area. I'm with a nurse, obviously. So I'm just trying to do whatever I can to just keep myself pseudo calm. Obviously, I'm freaking out. I'm in the hospital for a major mental health reason. I'm just like, what's gonna happen to me? And so eventually, the social worker that we had been assigned to the previous night comes in and is like, look, if you want to wait for a a first party inpatient place, you're probably gonna be waiting another 3 or 4 days. And I'm just like, I just want to go home. I don't care what I have to do, I just want to go home. And so obviously the social worker understands, and a few hours later I am discharged, thankfully. I was really sad that I missed that day because it was one of the first meetings of the Dungeons and Dragons Club at my school, which I am now president of. If you didn't know. So, yay. But that was my first year with the club, second year and I'm the president. Funny coincidence. Anyway, and I was obviously a DM, and so that day was the day that I was supposed to introduce my campaign and get my players, and I missed it. And I was like, well, shit. So anyways, I get discharged, and immediately the first thing I do is I go see my therapist, and she is very concerned and actually says that, like, she is not trained for this kind of thing, and if it doesn't get better, I'm gonna have to stop seeing her. And I was like, no, I can't stop seeing you. I love the cat. I can't have the cat out of my life. Unfortunately, we did eventually have to stop seeing her, but that was, like, a whole other thing. More on that later. And so I go back to school the next day, and yeah, I'm in school for about a week before we get contacted by the hospital and basically recommended for a partial hospitalization program, which is basically like, for the duration of the school day, I go to a nearby, like, branch thing of the hospital where other patients go, and basically the nurses and stuff, like, it basically is like going to the hospital in place of school. So it's like, you go, if you've ever done partial, you'll know what it is, but for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's like, you go there, they give you, like, some kind of breakfast, but that's obviously optional, especially for those who, like, eat in the morning before they come, like me. And then, like, you have, like, some sort of, like, mental health activity, like coloring or something, and then there's the school hour where, like, you have an hour to, like, you bring your laptop and, like, you do your schoolwork. It's like a no phones allowed, no other technology allowed except for your school-approved device, and you can only be on school-approved sites, otherwise you lose computer privileges, and you have to request printouts from all of your teachers off of partial hours. So that's the whole thing, and then basically you come back for lunch, you a lot of times watch a movie, but I do remember there was one day where they have, can't remember if it's an Xbox or a PlayStation in the room, and they let us play Minecraft on that. It was me and a few of the other kids in the room that I was in. We were playing Minecraft together, and it was actually pretty fun. And then after that, you have, like, a sort of mental health lesson, and then a group activity, and then a closing, and then you go home. And so, obviously, I just wanted to go back to school, because obviously that did not do well. I was in that program for 5 days, Thursday, Friday, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday I was discharged. I actually got to go home early. They discharged me at around noon. And it was actually unfortunate, because, like, I made a friend on Wednesday. She had just came that Wednesday, like, that Wednesday was her first day, and she was really artsy like me and was drawing a lot, and so we got together and were like, hey, like, you're an artist too, and, like, eventually we started doing, like, a puzzle together, and then it was school time, and I was like, no, I want to keep doing fun stuff with my new friend. And the unfortunate thing is we weren't allowed to give away, like, our phone numbers or stuff. It really sucks. Eventually I learned that one of the other people I'd been with went to my school, and it was just like, hey, I know you from the hospital. Which is, like, it's really weird, but, like, at the same time, it's like, you went through a very hard experience together, so I guess there's that bond. But basically, that was just one of the worst moments of my life, ever. And that's coming from back in kindergarten, when my dad has admitted that he didn't know how to be a parent, especially to a neurospicy child like me. Because I had a lot more behavioral issues back then than I do now. I did not mask at all when I was little. More on that later in another video. So I just thought I'd share this, and that leads me to my question. How do people with all of these big mental health diagnoses, like schizophrenia, psychosis, and stuff like that, I just want to know how they comfortably take themselves to the hospital, or, like, are brought to the hospital by family and stuff, and are not, like, terrified that they're going to be, like, admitted to an insane asylum. Just, like, not terrified of, how are they not terrified of the hospital? If you match that, if you were, like, someone with, like, a similar diagnosis or a more severe diagnosis of anything, and you are not terrified to go to the hospital, let me know in the comments, and just tell me, if you can give me tips on how to not be scared of the hospital, that would be really great, because, like, I know they're trying to help, but at the same time, I don't view it as help. And I would love tips on how to view it as help and not as potential torture. But anyway, this is getting pretty long. This has got to be one of the longest videos I've ever done. And I've never done a story time video, so I will see you guys in the next video. Hopefully the next one will be more positive. And yeah, keep staying awesome, y'all.